Okay, welcome back to another tutorial. In this specific instance, we are going to talk about how to add a UI billboard to our scene so that we can provide the user with some contextual feedback about what actions they are supposed to take in the scene. So we've talked about in class a number of different ways we might provide the user feedback, and in this case, we're just going to give them some direct instructions that they can then follow, and we'll create some scripts to sort of dynamically update those instructions just to give you a sense of how you might be able to kind of manipulate that on the fly. So let's go ahead and get started. If you recall, I have this push button object that controls the state of my conveyor. So it will start and stop the conveyor, and I want to convey that information to the user. And let's go ahead, and what we're going to do is we're going to add something called a tooltip. And to start off, what we're going to do is we are going to right click on our game object. And if yours isn't interactive, that's okay. You can still follow along with what I'm doing with the push button, but presumably you have something that is interactive and will be able to be set up roughly the same way that the push button is. If you're using like a grab interactable, like one of the cubes or something, I think it'll work as well. You just may have to make a few tweaks to make sure that you're capturing the correct state of the system. But if you recall, the push button also has like the hover, the selected, the focused, all those kind of states. So it should behave pretty much the same as all the other interactables. All right, so let's go ahead and hit right click on our object that we want to add a tooltip to, and we're going to hit create empty. We're going to call it tooltip, and you can see grayed out that I already have one kind of built here. Um, but you know, we'll kind of go along here, and then we'll double check our work based on the previous tooltip that I built. All right, so now that we have this placeholder, let's go ahead and right click again, and we're going to create another empty game object. I want you to call that child line renderer. Okay, and then we're going to add a component to it called line renderer. All right, and once we've added that, we need to add a material to our line renderer. If you come in and hit that little circle with a dot in it, and then we type default, you'll find that there is in fact a default line already created for us. Just double click on that. And then once you have that in place, we can go ahead and make some adjustments to it. But yeah, let's go ahead and we'll just, we'll change the color here. And I'm going to make mine kind of a blue color. Yeah, let's go blue. I don't really want the kind of gradient here. Well, or if I do want the gradient, let's actually switch the gradient around. Oops, got rid of it. There we go. So we can do that. Maybe we want to go kind of like lighter blue to darker blue. Cool. All right, so we'll do that. That'll look cool. I'm also going to change the width of the line, 0.005. That'll be good. And that'll probably have us set up for now. Now, the next thing that we want to do is to add a script to our line renderer. And we're going to call that script 2-point line. And you can see I actually already have this set up. So we're going to go ahead and add that. So let's click into this and just see what this script actually is doing. So I'll stay on here long enough so that you can add all of these elements in, but I'll talk you through it line by line. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to be able to pass it 2 points. We want to be able to define where the start and end point of our line is going to be for the tooltip that we're going to add to the scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a public transform, and we are going to add and call that point A, and then we're going to add a second public transform and call that point B. So go ahead and add those into your script here. And then we also want to add a private line renderer line. All right. And then inside of our start, we're going to get our line renderer, line equals get component line renderer. And the system probably will IntelliType this for you. So if you see this pop up, you can go ahead and just hit tab. And then finally in our update, we need to add a line position count. And then we need to set it to line.setPosition 0.a.position and line set position 1.b position. And then because we want to be able to see what our line looks like when we're in the edit mode and not have to constantly hit play just to see all the little changes we're making, I want you to, all the way at the top, above where it says public class and the name of our script, I want you to add this sort of box parentheses and then type inside of it, execute in edit mode. What this will do is it'll actually show us the line that's being rendered inside our editor rather than us having to hit play or to build the application to see that our line is working. So if you've done that correctly, then in fact, what we should have is the script working here. And make sure you hit save after you're done typing your script so that it'll update in here, and you should see a point A and a point B. Now we just need to actually go and create those points. So on your line renderer, hit create empty game object, call it point A, and then duplicate that, and let's call it point B. All right. And then let's go ahead and drag point A onto point A and point B onto point B. And then as you can see here, we can take point B and we can actually begin to drag it to where we want it. And you can see that point A is going toward the center of our button. I'm actually going to adjust my point A. I don't really want it exactly in the center. I kind of want it maybe like coming out of the side of the button. So I'm going to adjust my point A a little bit. All right, so that seems like a pretty reasonably good start. I'm getting some errors here, but I think that was just because we were, again, we're in edit mode. So when you're missing the second variable, it was just, throwing some errors temporarily. All right, so now we got our line kind of where we wanted. And once we have that, again, you can kind of play around with the line renderer. So, if you wanted to change the width, you can probably go way, 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 way too big. I wouldn't recommend that. 0.01, that's a little chunky. I don't know if I love that. 0.05 feels like a pretty good thing. And again, you can change the color and mess around with that. So, again, you can come back in here and modify this to your heart's content, but remember, I wouldn't get too crazy with it. Keeping it simple for now is probably the way to go. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to add a canvas onto our point, point B. So our endpoint of where our canvas is going to attach is point B. So you can come into right click on point B, UI, and if you look down here, you'll see the canvas object. We're going to add that canvas. And the first thing we need to do to the canvas is change it to world space. So come over here to render mode. You're going to change it from screen space overlay to world space. And when you zoom out a bit and we select our canvas here, we need to set its position 0, 0, 0. So now it's centered on here. And you can kind of see, hold on if I'm showing this correctly. Oops, there you go. There's your canvas. And let's see, we want to see our canvas size. Now, for some reason, this seems really big, so let's just drop this. There we go. Let's try and drop this to like 1 and 1. So there we go. So for some reason, it always starts the canvas out in like, weird screen space sizes like 800 by 800. So way, way, way bigger than what our scene usually is. So what we want to do is set that down to a more reasonable size. And then you can do stuff like this, right, where you can kind of adjust it. And what I usually like to do is I like to try and get it to where the corner of the canvas sort of lines up with the end of our um, point here. And then, just pick an appropriate size for what you feel like the size of your canvas should be. And again, if you want to just be able to drag it, you can come over to this tool panel here and hit the what is that? The rect tool, and that'll let you kind of drag it like a normal box, right? All right. So now that we have the canvas in place and we have set the size to something a little more reasonable, we can go ahead and we need to add a UI panel. So we're going to right click on our canvas, come over here to UI. We're going to hit add panel. So now we have a panel. What that panel is going to do is it's going to essentially give us a background on which to paint our text. So right now the default background is this sort of weird transparent thing. We don't really want that, so let's go ahead and set that to none. All right, so then we get this nice little transparent kind of thing going here. But we want to go ahead and just for the sake of consistency, I'd like to make it kind of the same blue color that I did the for the line renderer. It's probably close enough. And then because we're trying to make this a little fancy, let's go ahead and duplicate our panel. And we'll rename this one outline. And then we'll name this one background. And we're going to set this one, or the outline, we're going to set its color to the blue. And you can see it's got a little bit of a transparency. Let's just go ahead and make that fully opaque. And then on the background, let's set its color to, something with some good contrast. Black's always a good choice. So let's go black. And then you'll see over here, we've got this stretch button. If for some reason yours is defaulted to something else, click on this little icon here and make sure it's stretching. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just, in our padding over here, we're going to add 5, 5, 5, and 5. I think that should be working. Why didn't that work? Well, undo that real quick. Let me just check my notes. All right, so we're going to set the background to black. Okay. And stretch. All right, so the background set to black. I need to change its opacity. Let's make it solid. And now let's try it. 5, 5, 5, and 5. Now, I'm not sure why we're getting this weird effect. Okay, so the issue with why this isn't doing exactly what I expected is because the height and width are not set properly. So let's change these to 370. And then what we want to actually do is set the scale to that. So don't actually change the width and height. Leave that as, something pretty basic, and then we'll change the scale. And now what we should see is that when we're looking at our UI panel here, that the outline is that blue color, and the background is the black color. And now you can see the padding, I can change that, right? I can make this really, really bold if I wanted to, just to kind of really emphasize it. So now you can see that. And again, I can come into the canvas here and I can just, make sure that it's lined up, as close as possible to that line. And again, just double check your canvas values. You can set it to, basically whatever you want in terms of aspect ratio. So maybe 800 by 400 is a good option. And then again, you can just kind of drag your panel around. So, pick a size that you think makes sense from like a pure text aspect ratio, and then have your scale set to 0.001 across the board. That way you get the appropriate sized canvas here. All right, let's keep going. And so now that we have that, now we're going to add a text mesh Pro onto our background. So again, we're going to come into UI. We're going to add text mesh Pro. This is going to represent our text. And what we want to do is we want our text field to actually fill this window. So we're going to come over to this like alignment icon here, and we're going to hit the Alt key or Command key on Windows or Mac. And what you're trying to get to is this little panel here. So we're going to hit this little stretch to all. So now it's stretched out. And then we can start manipulating our text. Now, if for some reason you're not seeing any like font show up and you're not getting any sort of things like that, what you want to do is you want to come down to Packages. And Text Mesh Pro is actually added as part of the URP set of packages. And you want to click on this. And then you can click into like packages or resources or scripts or editor tests, any one of these folders, and you should get like a prompt that asks you if you want to import any of the sort of associated elements of TextMesh Pro. You want to say yes to that, and I've already done that. So just in case, I'll show you really quickly how you can come into here, and we're going to come into the Unity registry. You can type text mesh pro, and you'll see that there are sort of a variety of options here. And let's see, how do I do this? Well, let's do this just for the sake of argument. I'm going to go ahead and remove it. Hopefully this doesn't completely break what I'm trying to show you here, but I'm going to remove it. That folder disappears. And now I'm going to install it. All right, cool. And now I have the TextMesh Pro folder back. And you can see I also have now some additional resources like fonts and shaders and sprites and other stuff that show up in my sort of documentation here. So a couple ways to do this. Again, you can come and click in here in the packages and then add it, or you can come into the package manager and just remove it, reinstall it. And by doing that, now when you click into your Text Mesh Pro, you'll see that that you have some different options here in terms of the fonts. And I believe if you come into, yeah, I think that's the only font that's in here for right now. So, but you can add additional fonts if you want. But yes, we gotta come in here and make sure that you have a font selected, make sure it's a good size. I like to center mine inside of everything. And then you can just put, some information relevant to the object or action you want. So in my case, I want the user to press the button to stop the conveyor. right? Um, so that's good, and gives the user a kind of basic prompt. But let me show you what it looks like in the headset, because there's a couple of things with this that I don't really love that we can improve on. So let's go ahead and hit play. And as you can see, I could see the message just fine. But as I move around, it's like kind of at a weird angle. If I were to come over to this side, you could see that the message isn't really in a place that I can see very easily. And then when I'm looking at it from the side, it's a little bit, turned to the side so I can't even read it. What I'd really rather have is for that message to kind of follow me. And the way we can do that is by adding an additional script onto our object to cause that billboard to look at or point itself in the direction of the user. So in order to get the canvas to point at the user, what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to add a component and we're going to call it vertical billboard. And I've already written this script. So you're going to type vertical billboard, call it whatever you want, vertical billboard 1 or whatever. You're going to hit new script, and then you're going to add that, right? And then after you've created the script, go ahead and double click to open it. And there's a couple of different things we're going to do in here. So there's two things that I want to do. One is I want to make the object point toward my user. And the way that we're going to do that is we need to first give it a public transform target. So for the time being, ignore all of this. We don't really need any of this part at the moment. We just really need this transform target. I'll talk a little bit about what this additional code is doing. So we just want public transform target. So type that in, public transform target. And then in our update, we're going to add transform dot look at target vector 3 up. You don't need any of this other code. You just need this part here inside the update and this part here above the void start. We'll come back to all this other stuff in just a second. So add the transform target, add transform look at target vector 3 up, hit save. And then let's come back over to our script. And when we look at it, our script has now added this target variable. Now you won't have the interactive button or text input yet. You'll just see the target variable if you did everything correctly. And what we're going to pass it is our XR origin main camera, because that represents our head. So we want the billboard to kind of look at and point in the direction of our head. And so we'll take the main camera and we will drag that on there. So if I've got this set up correctly, now when I move around the scene, the billboard should face my character. So let's go ahead and give that a quick look. All right, so what you can see right now is it is facing me, but it is backwards. And that's partly because of the way we set up the different points. So it's facing the wrong direction. So let's go ahead and fix that problem real quick, and that's relatively easy to do. All right, so yeah, in our scene, it looks correct, but obviously when we are running the scene, it's backwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this canvas object, we're going to drag it outside of our point B, like that, and then we're going to click on point B, or all we're going to do is we're going to flip that 180 degrees. So now our point is facing the correct direction. We can grab our canvas again. You can drag that back onto point B. Again, you dragged it out. Now you're going to drag it back in. And now it's inheriting that 180 degree turn. So now when I run my game again, the billboard should be facing the correct direction. And there you go. The billboard is now looking the proper direction, and I can basically zip to any other place in my scene, and the billboard will continue to show me the message in the appropriate spot, right? So you can see how that's kind of useful. And you can get even fancier with it. Like you could, adjust the script to maybe move the point A and the point B, relative to, the user as well. But just to keep it simple, just having the screen look at you and rotate is probably good enough for now. All right, so we've got that going. And there's a couple of additional things that we might want to do, right? So for me in particular, since my action needs to update, so when I stop the conveyor belt, I'd like this message to switch and say start the conveyor belt. I went ahead and modified my script, right? So again, we have a script on our point here, and just like I did with my roller starting and stopping, I needed to pass it this interactable button. You could also pass it, this one of the other interactable objects that you have associated with your banner. And the way you do that is by creating a reference to that object, right? So that's what all this rest of this code kind of helps me do. So first thing we need to do to make sure that we can actually even find our interactable XR objects is to type the phrase up here, using Unity Engine .xr.interaction .toolkit semicolon. So that's the registration of the library that we need. This is the namespace for the different objects. And now we can go ahead and add in this additional information. So we want to add in this public XR simple interactive button, because that's going to be the button object. It'll probably be something different for you. So maybe name it whatever your grabbable object. So mine's the interactive button. Yours could be the grabbable cube or the grabbable plate or the grabbable sword or the grabbable whatever. But it's going to be something that you have an XR interaction on. And then inside of our start function, we want to take that object. So in my case, interactive button, yours could be grabbable something. And we want to say interactive, whatever you are, dot select entered, dot add listener, x equals greater than toggle conveyor on is the name of my function. You can name this whatever you want. So we're going to end up creating our own function. So yours might be, change object color, or plant object in ground, or activate object, whatever give it a descriptive sort of name. And so this right here, toggle conveyor on, is the name of the function we're going to create in the parentheses. And then you'll come down here and you'll create a public void, repeat the name of that function, add the little squiggly parentheses, and this is where you're going to put your code for what you want that thing to do, right? And so I don't know what you're going to need to do for each of your individual applications. For mine, I was just needing to check that if the conveyor was true, on, or false, off, and then updating some things based on that. And so you can see up here in my variables, I added a private Boolean, which is a true false variable called conveyor on. It's set to true at the beginning of the game because my conveyor starts in the on setting. And then when this function gets called is when I push the button. So when I push the button, the system goes, hey, whatever the state of conveyor on was previously, so if it was true, I want you to set it to false. If it was false, I want you to set it to true. So that's what this little exclamation in front of that variable name means. It's basically taking the current state of that variable and doing the opposite of it. So in this case, it was true. This exclamation says, now change it to false and reset the variable to that. And then it says, if the variable is true, right? So when you put a variable name into an if statement like this, it's simply looking for a true or false. I could have just as easily said if conveyor equals true or does not equal true. I could have written it however I wanted. So you're going to have to do some research and figure out exactly what makes sense for your action or set of things that you're doing with your interactions. But in my case, it says if it's true, what I need to do is set my text to press the button to stop conveyor. If it's false, I want it to say press the button to start conveyor, right? So if I'm setting it to false, I need to change my message to start. If I'm setting it to true, I need to change my message to stop. And in order to pass the message information, I need an additional variable. I need to pass it our text mesh pro text input so that I can then update the text inside that field. So that's where this public TPM underscore text object comes in. So I need to add that. And in doing that, I've now given the script all of the different game objects, all of the different states that I need in order to update that message based on the state of my conveyor belt. So now I can come back in, and all I need to do is I need to drag my push button, my interactive object. So that's the thing we're listening for. We're listening for the interaction of this object. And then I need to pass it my text mesh pro text right there. And now my script is going to manage this for me. So now when I go in my headset, I should get a couple different things going on. So the billboard should be following my position so that I can easily read it. All right, seems to be doing that. So I'm over here. It says, hey, press the button to stop the conveyor. I'm going to come up right next to it, and then I'm going to push the button. My conveyor belt has stopped. The music associated or the sound associated with the conveyor has stopped. And now my button panel says start. And you can see as I move around toward it, like the panel actually tries to adjust relative to my head position. Now, if I start my thing again, the button switches to stop the conveyor. So my message is dynamically now updating based on the state of my conveyor. Very cool. All right, so there's still one more thing that we could do to try and improve the the behavior of this, and this would be to dynamically have this message pop up. And so one way we could do that would be the set active function that we've been talking about in class and in some of our demos, right? We want to be able to toggle this whole thing on and off. So one way we might be able to do that would be to try and create some sort of a collider type situation. So we could probably add a collider onto this billboard script by adding a collider onto our point, and we'll use a specific type of collider in this case. So I'm going to add, let's just say a box collider. And so we're going to add that box collider, but we're not gonna make it a traditional collider. We're actually going to make it a trigger. And in the case of a trigger, what we're saying is we don't want the box collider to have like any physics or to actually like collide with our objects in any sort of weird way where this billboard would get kind of like shot around or anything like that. What we're going to do is we're going to change this box collider um, to essentially be a boundary, a region around our system, so that that panel only appears when I'm within sort of the bounds of the system, right? I only want the billboard to show up if I'm near the conveyor belt. If I'm not near the conveyor belt, I don't want to see that because it's just not relevant. So controlling the context of when these messages appear is also important. The same way, when I hover on something, I get a tooltip, right? I don't want that tooltip always showing. I hover, it shows, right? So again, this is something we can do with either the interactives or even our just player character, that kind of thing. So what we're going to do is we will go ahead and take our box collider and let's go ahead and edit it. So if you hit this button, it allows you to kind of edit it, and it's a little difficult to see sometimes depending on the color or shape of your collider relative, but you can see there's these little squares that you can grab, and these kind of let you extrude the collider. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make like a pretty good size sort of region around the box of the conveyor. And then I want to kind of extend this down to where it's like kind of around the floor area. And then I think let's extend it kind of over here. And since our button is really kind of only on this one side, I'm going to just kind of adjust it to be, just to this side. So if I enter this sort of what I'll call like an interaction zone, that's kind of where I want this to trigger. And let me pause here for a sec because I just want to double check something. Okay, so now what I want to do, now that I've checked on the steps here, is I want to actually add another script. Well, actually, I think what we can do is we can add it to the existing script. So we're going to add it to our vertical billboard script. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the collider event, the trigger associated with our box collider, to the system. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to add a, let's see, is it a public or a static? I don't remember here. It's a void. Okay, so we're going to add a void on trigger, enter. And what we're going to do now is we need to pass it the script, or actually what we need to pass it is the game object. Yeah, that's what we want to pass. We want to pass it the game object of the canvas and line renderer and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and pass game object, and we'll just call it billboard for now. And what we're going to do is we're going to say billboard dot set active false. And well, actually, we want to set it to true. And then private, well, let's just say void on trigger exit. We want to set billboard dot set active to false. All right, so we have when we enter that box collider, it's going to turn the billboard on. When we exit the box collider, that billboard is going to turn off. So if I leave that little area, it should turn off. So go ahead and hit save. And let's come back in here. And we should see a new object, our billboard object here. And remember, our billboard is this canvas here. And the only issue with this is that we don't want to just turn off the canvas. We also want to turn off the line renderer. So we'll have to maybe come back and think about how we want to do that. But for the time being, where the line renderer is on our point, or our point is on our line renderer. Doing it this way is not maybe the best way, but we'll kind of keep through it just to kind of keep going here, and then we'll go back and adjust it here after we double check here. So what this should do is it should turn off the canvas at the beginning of the or when we leave the box, and turn it on when we enter the box. So I'm going to start with it off. I'm going to walk my character toward the conveyor belt, and then when I enter that box collider, it should turn the canvas back on, and if I leave that spot, it should turn it back off. So hopefully that works. Let's give it a try and see kind of what happens. All right, so I'm looking around. Looks like I'm probably already within the space here. All right, come on, get my tracking back here. Let's come over here. All right, so that doesn't seem to be working for some reason. Oh, there it goes. All right, so I left the zone. You can see that the box is like now off, and when I come back in, it turns the canvas back on. If I leave again, it's back off. There you go. So it's back on. I can stay within the area and it'll turn it off. If I come back in the area, it's back on. All right, cool. So now that's working kind of the way I want it to. It was a little janky there. I think probably because my character started inside the box collider. So the first time that I was moving around, it probably wasn't quite sure what to do. Um, so you know, you might have to think around how you want to do that. Um, we also have this line renderer. Um, and the problem is if I do the script the current way with it on the point itself, that's not probably the best way to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our box collider and can we just move it to the tooltip? No, I didn't think so. All right, so we're going to remove the box collider from our point because that's not really what we want. What we really want to do is we want to put the box collider onto like the push button, um, or better yet, let's create an empty game object. Let's do that. So we're going to create an empty game object, and we're going to call it billboard collider. All right. We'll add our box collider to that. And then we can just go ahead and we can just grab our game object, right? And we can resize this here. And I'm going to scale up the X. And I'm going to make it, again, just about the size of my kind of conveyor area here. I'm going to keep it nice and close like this. And then I'm going to come back over to my script that we just made, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to copy, or in fact, I'm just going to cut that set of functions out, and we're just going to create a new script, and we're going to reuse those. All right, so I cut those. I'll come over here to my billboard collider. I'm going to add a new script, and I'm going to call it billboard toggle. Create that new script. Cool. Double click on it. Come over here, paste those back in, and I'll get an error for the time being, but we're going to correct that here in just a second. And we're going to say game object, billboard, semicolon. All right, and we want to make that a public game object. All right, so now we have a public billboard, and we'll pass that information here in a second. And what we want to do is on the start of our application, rather than me having to toggle it on and off in the game, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say billboard. I want you to start it off. This starts the billboard off. And then you can always add comments to your code to help remind you what these things do. This turns billboard on. This turns the billboard off. Cool. And go ahead and hit save. Come back into Unity. And there you go. There's the billboard game object. And so now that this is no longer attached to this, now what I can do is I can just pass it the whole tooltip, right? I don't have to have this canvas on or off anymore. I can literally have the whole tooltip passed to that. And what I told the script to do is at the start of the game, go ahead and turn this off. And only if I enter into this region, turn it on. So the last thing I need to do is remember on the box collider, we need to make sure that it's set to is trigger, because again, it's not a physical collider in this case, it's an event collider. And so if this is set to is triggered, I can walk into this and it won't mess with my character. It'll just trigger the event. So let's go ahead and hit play and give it a whirl and see what happens here. All right. All right. As you can see, my billboard is not there. As I walk toward, as I get in that boundary, it turned on the billboard. So as I step away from the boundary, no billboard. If I enter the boundary, it turns on. Oh, cool. If I move around, the billboard follows me. If I come over, I can turn it off, turn it on. And so now I have a fully dynamic thing. Now, you may want to adjust the size of the billboard, or you may want to adjust the size of that bounding area depending on how close or how far away your user starts from the experience. So, this is probably a little narrow for my taste, so we could probably increase it in the Z direction a little bit. And like maybe rate. Yeah, it's a little bit better probably. So not like super far, but like not super close. Let's go ahead and give that a try and just kind of see how that works. All right, so if I come over here, oh yeah, that's a much better starting point. So I'm just approaching the conveyor belt. I get my little billboard, and there you go. Cool, awesome. All right, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. You can see we've got a number of different visual feedback mechanisms now. And now that makes it a lot easier for my users to figure out what they can or can't do. I can, come over here. I can turn on my little conveyor belt and start sending things along. I could even send my little fire extinguisher. And as I enter the sort of interactive space, I can then use that information to start and stop my conveyor belt and give my user an idea of what to do. Um, the other thing to keep in mind is that, if you have areas like what I have here, where, maybe I'm in a scene, and as I move through my environment, the other thing I might be able to do is, I could use that same billboard, but, I could use that billboard to just give me some general information about the scene. It doesn't even have to be specific to that button. It could just say something like, welcome to the factory. Your job is to scan packages using the conveyor belt system. And then as I entered another box collider, it could change the message to, push button to start conveyor. And I start the conveyor system, right? So play around with how you want to use that, repurpose different boundaries and different banners, set different banners up based on your location. And then you can affect even the position and appearance of objects, right? So maybe some of the interactive objects don't appear until you enter a region, right? So these are just basic ideas and concepts that I'm showing you. You still need to figure out how best to apply them. All right, so with that, you've got kind of all the basics that you need to understand how to, um, apply this UI tool. I will create a follow-on tutorial where if you want to create an interactive UI panel, so like a menu system, that we understand how to do that. It'll follow a lot of the same principles that we used for just creating the tooltip, except we'll add some interactive controls like buttons and sliders and some toggles and things like that to the panel. That way, if you wanted to bring up a menu to change some settings about your controller setup, or bring up a panel to give your user access to some other objects or menu items that are associated with your game, things like that. Or even just to reset your application. So we could have the scene restart itself and spawn the character back at the beginning. So those are some steps that we'll go through in a separate tutorial. All right, hopefully you find this helpful, and we'll continue on with some more advanced tutorials at a